Leesa from Australia recently contacted us to share her story about child pedophilia in Australia. She is a third generation born in Jehovah's Witness. She is currently being shunned by her family and so-called friends from the congregation. And it has nothing to do with drugs, sex, and rock and roll. But it has everything to do with her questioning the two-witness rule. Please join in listening to the discussion, which is already in progress.
You're listening to The Critical Thought, where we challenge our listeners to use critical thinking when examining the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Not uncommon in Jehovah's Witnesses. That's what makes it so sad.
Yeah, that's true. It happens more than we think it actually happens. And your experience is especially if you go back a few years, your experience is a very, very common experience. The Watchtower has been trying to clean up their act recently because it's becoming so costly. So they're constantly trying to change their rules and everything. But it really highlights the problem that they have, that they find themselves in the same position that many of the denominations and religious groups that they have historically condemned to death. I mean, just condemned in every fashion. It's actually amazing how they find themselves in the same predicament as those denominations and those religions. And the basic reason why is because they made the foolish decision to do exactly what these denominations that they condemn have done. And that is they've tried to handle this issue in-house. We're going to keep this inside. Nobody knows about it. We're going to handle it ourselves. And it's basically is blowing up in their face now.
When I gave my testimony to the Australian Royal Commission, one of the commissioners said he found my story very compelling because I could relate intergenerational trauma, as I say in my email to you. So this policy of covering up child abuse has gone back many generations in my family. Well, my children are fourth. So it actually becomes a tradition. So when my child is abused and my child's fourth, the two-witness rule automatically just clicks in, and the men of the family who are so conditioned to protecting the abuser and protecting the organisation's name above anything else are just emasculated. They can't act as fathers or parents, and I think it's really sad too that even though we lived in a small town, a small rural town in Australia, the policies and procedures of Watchtower were more important than the law in Australia and also just common moral decency.
Yeah.
But it makes the people unable to act. So
yeah.
And then of course, you know, in the case of my grandfather's abuse, the many children that he abused weren't offered and were actively discouraged from having any sort of psychological help because the family thought that worldly counsellors would encourage them to leave the truth. So now these women are in their 40s and their 50s, and my grandfather has died with a full witness burial, and they are suffering, you know, terrible emotional and mental problems as a result of never having these issues, for one, you know, spoken about, and so there's a great injustice has been done for them, and also they've never had any psychological help.
Yeah, that's very true. The historical track record of Jehovah's Witnesses in this area is very dismal, and it's very dismal today when you consider one of the questions, and we plan on putting together a video to address some of the things about the Royal Commission, just some points we picked up. But one of the things that kind of stood out to me is how the judge or the court, as it were, they kept asking the same question of all the Watchtower representatives for the most part. And that is, do you guys understand what we have learned, what the body of knowledge is in regards to child molestation, child rape? Do you know what we have learned and how people are impacted? And it was so obvious that they didn't. And that was really what I found as I watched the members of the court, their faces, the looks on their faces were like, y'all guys don't get it, do you? I mean, y'all just don't get what's going on. And and you could see that.
Yeah, the Watchtower threw them under the bus. And you know what's interesting is, even though we're in Tasmania, so we're several thousand kilometres away from them, that was my congregation that I got baptised in. So those men sitting there I knew personally.
Wow.
And the Watchtower just let them get thrown under the bus.
I mean, you're right. They literally threw those guys under the bus.
They did. And also I thought what was very sad, which resonated in my case as well, was the fact that when Bowditch was asked about the policy of disfellowshipping people and then not telling the public or not letting anybody know, especially not letting the police know that there was a potential pedophile in their community, means that they have no duty of care to the general public. And that's what I found really upset me when the abuser of my child finally, after 12 years, dumped his Christian wife for a young employee with small children. She had no idea of his record in the Jehovah's Witnesses because he disassociated himself and walked away. So her children were put at great risk, but not one elder cared.
Yeah, this is really the driving point of this whole investigation. Basically, this is what you have. You have a religious institution, a religious organization that has legal status and legal recognition within the country. The government has acknowledged that you can operate as a religious organization, a religious group, a religious entity. And all they were basically asking was the following question. We realize that pedophiles are found in every facet of society. The question that we have for the Watchtower is, how do you guys handle it when this issue comes up? Because we allow you to operate in various communities. So in return, what does your religion do to protect the community? And if you listen to the various people on the stand, they were all speaking in the context of, this is what we do to protect Jehovah's Witness kids. And what they demonstrated was, first of all, when the three local elders were on the stand, the court got to see something that was really probably frightening. Because the court is thinking, these are the three men that you got on the front line. These are the first responders. These are the guys who are the first people that touched this issue. And they saw people who literally were not qualified. The elders just kept saying, when we have an issue, we ring the branch. We just ring the branch. And so it's like, okay, and so you could just see it building up in the court in terms of, okay, so we must gonna get some very interesting material from the branch, because these guys keep talking about they just called the branch. They just called the branch. And then the branch, and then of course the branch got on the stand, and the branch was just as bad as the local elders. So it became very obvious to everyone in court, you've got to be kidding. These are this is the caliber of men that you have investigating child rape. You've got to be kidding. And then the point that you made, which is really the driving point, okay, this is what you do to protect children in your church, but you operate in the community. So the court wants to know, what does your organization, what does your entity do to protect children in the community in which you serve? You said that this particular, Westlake or New Haven or whatever, you say that this is your area that you serve the community with your religious program. So what do you do when someone in your group is a pedophile to protect this area of citizens that you say you're serving? And it became very obvious that y'all don't do a thing. They asked the question, so if a person is just, like you said, if a person is disfellowship, y'all kick him out of y'all church, but he's still a pedophile. So what happened to him?
Well, I thought it was interesting as well that not only is the pressure put on the pressure that's put on the family then to protect the pedophile within the congregation once the two-witness rule kicks in, because when my child was assaulted, I rang my father, who's anointed, and two elders, and my husband was away working. So this elder came to visit, so-called on a shepherding call, and when I turned my back to go in and obediently make a nice cup of tea, he came with the brother and he sent the brother away. And, you know, there's that rule about if a sister's at home alone, you should never be there alone. So I thought he wanted to talk to me about something very important, some counsel. So I thought it was a privilege. So I went in to make tea and left this man chatting to my small child, who was 5. And I came out and found my child on his lap, absolutely eyes popping out of its head. And then him and the brother came back and they left. So I thought it's interesting where Ash and Led are talking about, you know, people like me saying apostate-driven lies, and it's our responsibility to protect our children, and they protect them spiritually. How can you protect your children from a shepherd on a shepherding call? How would you even do that? And then when you ring straight away, because my child told me straight away that about the assault, which was very painful, and I rang the elders and they said two-witness rule immediately. So it was clunk in. So then that meant that it was my job to sit there and in a Kingdom Hall for 12 years and watch this man, a prominent elder, interact with other families' children. And yet you're talking about the elders that investigated my child's claims, who wanted to interview her, and they were a carpenter and a plumber. That's what skills they had, and they wanted to interview my 5-year-old about an incident of sexual assault. So when the two-witness rule kicked in, to show my obedience as a mother and a sister and a wife, this perpetrator, this person who assaulted my child, got me to go on a Bible study with him that he started with my child's music teacher, who was a young, attractive woman. And because I was there, she happily invited us into her home. So, you know, sisters are required to protect these abusers, and she would have been mortified. She would have died if she had have known what I did. And I'm mortified. But that's how far you have to go to prove that you are faithful as a sister.
Yeah, it mainly revolves, and see, that's the kind of things I tell people, that revolves around the culture of Jehovah's Witnesses. Not necessarily something in the magazine, but this is the culture. This is the way the culture works. Certain things are considered acceptable, certain things are not considered acceptable. And so it's almost as if you know your place, you know what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do, if you want to remain in favorable standing with the group. Because at the end of the day, everything is about, we have to protect the name of the organization. And so the way it's always presented is, and I know, you know, growing up here in the United States, you know, I've talked to so many people over the years in how their cases were actually handled. And it's all handled pretty much the same way. In terms of, for some people, they were directly told not to go outside, not to go to police. But it's interesting how others were actually told the same thing in essence. They would be told such things as, well, sister, if you want to take this matter, for example, if it's only one witness, right? So without the other witness, there's nothing they can do. Okay. So the sister will be told, well, sister, if you want to go to the police, you have the right. You are free to go. And after they give her all this, you can go, it's your right, they will often conclude with such statements as, now keep in mind how this is going to reflect on the So at that point, you know, you just literally put that person in a catch-22, because keep in mind, since they did not move on this particular male Jehovah's Witness, that meant he's in good standing technically in front of the congregation. So when you now go to the police, you know, you have now raised a red flag. And see, I know situations where congregations were trying to get kingdom halls built in communities, and they had pending legislation or pending, they was trying to get like building permits, or they was trying to get waivers of certain things to get rezoned, that kind of good stuff. And so now the congregation got information, they got business pending before the county. And so now the last thing you need is somebody from the church talking about, we got a pedophile up in this church. And so those friends were told, this could impact the congregation getting the permit to build the kingdom hall. Do you want to be responsible for that? And so there will be people, I know people who the elders, they told them, they opened the Bible up and they share with them what the Bible says. And the Bible says that there are times when you need to let yourself be wrong. And so here you have something that's even worse, because here you have elders who are willing to acknowledge you have a legitimate gripe. Your child was molested, but sometimes, sister, you got to let yourself be wrong. If Jehovah is willing to forgive this man, and the congregation representatives as elders have forgiven this man, then sister, who are you and your child? Can you not extend forgiveness to this man as well? And so when you start putting Jehovah's Witnesses in those type of situations, then you see how the culture works. You see how the peer pressure kicks in. Well, Jehovah forgave him. The elders representing the whole congregation, they forgave him. Now I'm just a single sister with 3 kids and an unbelieving husband trying to serve Jehovah. Who am I to not forgive this man? And then I know people who were told, well, sister, you got to understand, even if you take this matter outside, your child, the damage will not be really fixed until we get into the new system. Whatever pain and suffering this child has undergone is not going to really be taken care of until the new system, sister. So, we want you to just think about this. We can't tell you, the body of elders can't tell you what to do. But we want you just to think about all the things and all the pieces that you need to consider before you walk down to the police department. And that's the kind of stuff witnesses were told. So did they tell the person they couldn't go to police? No, they didn't. Did they tell the person that it was, if you go, we're going to do this to you? No, they didn't. But what they did, they set the table so that the person now no longer wants to go, feels that going would be the wrong decision. And so you get the whole gamut from elders directly telling people, don't take this matter to the police, to elders using coercion to where the person now feels bad if they actually go to the police. These are the type of cultural things, and none of this is in writing. You're not going to find this in writing. You're not going to find this in a magazine. But this is the culture that over the years, and like you said before, and it's not to denigrate anyone's secular employment, but when you have individuals who don't have the skill set to do investigations, you're in trouble. You're literally in trouble. And that's what typically happens in the average congregation. The average elder has no background in this stuff. And that's this, even when I was an elder, that was one of the things that I remember, as a former Bethelite, there were a number of former Bethelites in the area in which I live here in the Washington, D.C. area in the United States. And when we attended elder school, we all ate lunch together. It's good to see all the old guys from Bethel and everything. And so we would just have open discussion. That was kind of unique, because Bethelites, because you've been at Bethel, you feel a little bit more free about talking about things that involve the society. Whereas local elders many times would never engage in these conversations. But a lot of the guys from Bethel, you just simply talk, man, I think about this, I don't know about that. And so you'll be more open because you felt more comfortable, because you actually knew many times the people who made the rules. You knew the guys in the writing department, you know the guys in the service department. So you felt a little more comfortable discussing what they were implementing. And so I remember we were just discussing about, how it would really be good, to have some type of training. And by the time we reached the final day, that was when anybody who was thinking about getting some additional training, and there were elders who were actually going to community college, they was trying to help their friends, because a lot of witnesses were dealing with depression, and if someone has been molested, depression is going to be a big thing. And as you mentioned, generally speaking, historically speaking, Jehovah's Witnesses have discouraged their people from going seeking psychological help, because basically they're going to really tell them when they start looking at their background, they're going to say, your religion plays because the first thing that they will see is that your religion plays a tremendous impact and role in your life.
Religion, it's all based on hate and fear of worldly people, waiting for Armageddon. And also you never have a guarantee, maybe you will be saved. So people are always hanging there.
People are scared to death. The average witness, and that's why one of the biggest questions that typically elders get asked by witnesses is, can we do that? Because they don't know what to do. They always have to ask.
They lose their autonomy. And, you know, I have my cousin and her husband are Bethelites. They've now left to nurse my old aunt. But to me, they're lovely, lovely people, but they're like company men. They could just as easily be working for Google or Chrysler or Ford.
Yes.
Because and even though he's a very kind and compassionate man, you know, they're a book publishing organisation, and yet they will counsel people about the most intimate matters in bedrooms, or mood disorders, or eating disorders, or substance abuse. All these things really are out of their scope of practice.
Absolutely. And what concerns me, and especially when you start, see, many times when people, and for a lot of people who come onto these forums like we're on right now, and even myself, I have to catch myself sometimes. We often think of Jehovah's Witnesses in quote unquote just Western countries, where where typically the average person may at least have a high school diploma. But when you consider that Jehovah's Witnesses have boots on the ground in over 200 countries, we're talking about they have elders who have almost no education. And they're being asked to handle these types of issues. Absolutely no qualifications whatsoever. And yet, these men all around the world, they're trying their best to give what they think is good advice, and they are just out there in left field. And that is one of the reasons why the society is making a lot of changes. They're pushing down appointment of elders to the circuit overseers, because the society don't want to be blamed for these elders out there who just all kind of wacky guys who are in positions. And so so now they can blame the circuit overseer. Well, he appointed them. We didn't know anything about it. They appointed that guy, not us. And so they're trying everything in their power to protect themselves. Because I have actually talked to guys in the search bar who are very candid, and they admit, you know, the society knows they have elders out there who are not even qualified according to the society's own standards, but they can get the friends. Like one brother said, they can get the friends out in service, and that's all that matters. And that's what it is.
As I see myself as a semi-intelligent woman, and as a sister, you're totally compliant. You might be out in field service with a brother, and he might tell you to do, you know, something in field service that you think it doesn't even make sense, but you do what he says. People don't also realize that it is a high control cult, and you leave your autonomy behind. So these men, when they put on their suits and their elders, doesn't matter if they're a plumber or whatever they are, they have ultimate power over life and death, really. You know, my mother was disfellowshipped by elders, and I think one of them was her brother-in-law, and they all worked in the timber industry. They run around on tractors and cut down logs, and these people disfellowshipped my mother, and she, for what they perceived as wickedness. But it ended up, you know, she was, you know, had an addictive problem and died of alcoholism. That dichotomy of, you know, when untrained men turn like substance abuse and addiction into wickedness, and then they turn child abuse into sin, and it's crime. They don't know what they're talking about.
Yes. When you consider, I remember growing up as a kid, people who heard voices, they were always considered as, it must be demonic influence. It could be the demons, okay? And so you go back through the history of the organization, and that's the kind of crazy stuff that they came up with. When in fact these people, they were merely needing some type of medication to balance the chemicals in their brain and so forth. But because these men didn't know, and because the society had put stuff out in magazines, that was the direction they went in. Well, you know, it might be Sister Johnson, you know, there could be some demonic activity. And next thing you know, they'd be like, well, Sister Johnson, did you get any blankets or anything at a yard sale recently? You know, crazy stuff like that.
Oh, we've all done it. We've all thrown things out that we've bought because of demons. And what's really sad is when my child remembered the abuse, having nightmares as a teenager, and told me exactly word for word what she had told me when she was 5. So I immediately rang my father and said, oh, this is the same story, she's remembered. And I always thought she wouldn't, and I was so shocked. And he said she must be demonized to dream bad things about an elder.
Yes, yes. That's the type of logic, and that was why I go back to what I said before. That is why the court kept asking the witness representatives, do you guys understand what the body of knowledge is in regards to child molestation? And that was why, you know, for example, the issue with being interviewed by 3 males.
Oh.
It demonstrated, and for years, I mean, for years, the society's basic position, and elders carried it out, that if someone accuses you, you face your accuser. Now, the body of knowledge that people have learned over the years was that you don't even bring children into courtrooms many times. They don't put them in front of the criminal or the accused. But witnesses, you know, they were just rolling, just rolling along. Bring the little 8-9-year-old little girl in and put her right in front of this 45-year-old man, along with 3 elders and her parents. Now, Sister Johnson, you tell us what did Brother Davis do to you? And she got to sit there and recount it. Anybody who has any training in psychological child behavior fields, they will look at that and they're like, I know y'all didn't do that. I know y'all didn't do that. Fortunately, today, the society has dropped that foolish teaching that a child now has to sit in front of a person who abused them. And that's, if anything is positive, that's one of the positive things that the society has done in regards to this issue of child molestation. They no longer have to have children sit in front of the person who molested them. But sad to say, there have been so many, for decades and decades, this was done, and now we're seeing these people are having to deal with the challenges they often face in their lives today.
I've just completed a 4-year social work degree at university here, and so of course a lot of that's involved in child protection and childhood trauma. And if a child told me about an incident of child abuse, a 4-year university degree has not given me the scope of practice to go and investigate that on my own. Sit down, have a chat. There's the proper authorities, there's the legal avenues, and there's the properly trained people. And I'm not one of them. You, as a mandatory reporter, you pass it on to the proper authorities. But these men, and again we're talking about mostly undereducated in these areas.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and isn't that a pity? If I can't do it, how can they do it?
It's very, very unfortunate. I mean, it is amazing. And so, you know, now, you know, the society realized how ridiculous it is. And because, see, all of those cases where they had people sit in front of the accuser, you know, those things are now coming to fore because, like you said, these people are now, you know, they're in their 30s, 40s, and 50s and probably older. And so what you're looking at, and this is really the whole problem. I tell people, you know, this whole issue of child molestation, there are basically 3 questions. And I tell people this all the time. There are 3 questions, and depending on how you answer these 3 questions will often determine whether an individual or an organization ends up being in a lot of trouble. The first question is, who knows about it? Second question, when do they know about it? And the third question is, what do they do with that information? And how you answer that question, who knows about it, that has a tremendous impact. When you have a 45 or 50-year-old woman who goes to a clinical psychologist and sits down and starts talking, one of the questions is they'll ask, well, who knows about it? And witnesses, because, you know, they're just being witnesses, they can't help it, they're just being witnesses, they'll tell the psychologist, well, I told the elders. And so the psychologist is like, you mean somebody know about this stuff happening to you? Yeah, the elders, I told them years ago. All of a sudden, the psychiatrist is sitting there like, there are people who actually know about this? And then you're looking at the elders. After the elders find out about it, what do? Now, this is very, very interesting. I always point this out to people. Is it not interesting that when there's a child molestation case, the elder will call the society? He will not call the writing department to get spiritual information. He calls the legal department, Now,
Yeah.
when you are talking to non-Jehovah's Witnesses, and you tell them that the first thing you do is you call your attorney, they already understand. Oh, you're lawyering up. You're lawyering up. What's up with this? What's up with this? Because, see, witnesses don't understand how in the real world that if a person says, I just call my attorney, that has significant meaning. You are a religion. You are a church. And you're not calling your main office for spiritual advice and direction, but you're calling the legal department? What about the child? And so this is the kind of stuff that as witnesses, we just never even gave it any thought. I mean, we just never even gave. When they put the society's lawyer from Australia on the stand, it was embarrassing. Oh my goodness, it was so embarrassing.
Wasn't it?
In fact, what he did was he overplayed his hand. He was trying to present himself like he wasn't aware of what goes on. Now keep this in mind now. I tell people, keep this in mind. If you watch the video, you'll see all the local elders kept saying, we ring the branch. We ring the branch. We ring the branch. So now the court has the branch on the stand. And they're like, you got to be kidding me. In fact, it got so bad. It got so bad during that hearing. The judge stopped and turned to the society's legal counsel. And he basically said, let me ask you a question, man. Are you the senior counsel for the Watchtower organization for the whole country? Yeah. And you don't know nothing about this? Yeah, I don't know much. I don't know much. Now keep it in mind, this attorney, from what I understand, this judge serves on what basically would be almost equivalent to the Supreme Court here in the United States.
Oh, a royal commission has tremendous power.
Yeah, he's a high. This is no local DA. This guy's a high-ranking attorney, and so in all his years, he's worked with so many corporations that he has seen what corporate lawyers know. Corporate lawyers know where the bodies are buried. Everybody knows that because the corporate lawyer's job is to get the client out of trouble. Corporate lawyers don't have to tell what conversations they have with their client. So when you sit there and play like you dumb, the judge is like, man, I've had clients tell me all kinds of stuff. You're going to sit here and tell me you don't know what's going on. And so he overplayed his hand. The guy said, are you serious that you're the senior counsel? Because you're sitting here like you don't know nothing. And I was like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness.
Did you know that the Watchtower was one of only 5 organisations, because the Royal Commission investigated all the religions, as well as a lot of state orphanages, the army, lots of different institutions. And did you know that Jehovah's Witnesses are only one of 5 institutions they're having to come back because they're not happy with them? You know, and Justice McClellan often had, you know, veiled contempt, you know, towards the brothers. I noticed, you know, it was just contempt, and he even made fun of the fact that they used the word judicial committee because he said it's right out of context. Yeah, it doesn't even make sense. Yeah, that was, and also the society didn't get their money's worth out of Monica Applewhite either. The social work.
Goodness, she was so embarrassing. Oh my goodness, they need to go back and get a refund. They need to get their, you know, I'm not trying to tell the society what to do, but those guys really need to get their money back. They really need to get their money back. She took their money. She took their money. She took their money.
She was incompetent and terrible. It was really, really terrible, her testimony.
Now, you know what's interesting, and this is what I find, as I sat there, I watched this woman, and I'm thinking to myself, this is absolutely amazing. Here is a female, a woman, who is a member of Christendom, and they have given her access to documents that no sister in the congregation could ever see. That is absolutely amazing. They gave a female woman of Christendom access to documentation, policies, procedures, guidelines, and directives that they wouldn't even give to a Jehovah's Witness woman. It is absolutely amazing. And so I'm thinking they told the worldly girl all this stuff.
And the practice standards for a social worker, because she's a clinical social worker, the practice standards are all about upholding human rights and protecting children. She did nothing. She was a gun for hire. I had absolutely no respect for her whatsoever. And neither did Justice McClellan. Did you see that he even showed that she wasn't even really properly educated for the job? She didn't really have enough expertise, and she hadn't published any evidence-based peer-reviewed papers even.
He took her official court submissions and he pretty much just shredded it. I mean, that's why I said the society need to get their money back. I mean, she really didn't do a good. She didn't help them at all. She was supposed to be coming in as an expert witness, and the court just literally just shredded what she had said. But I'm gonna tell you that this whole issue with the pedophilia is an interesting one, because it goes back to what I often tell people when I have this discussion. The society wanted to handle this type of stuff in-house. They turned it over to individuals who had no qualifications to handle this, and now it's coming back to burn them. And the court's basic position is very simple. What you guys do when you run across the issues of child rape does nothing to protect the community. And this court and this body here, we are interested in what are the legal entities that we allow to operate in our country. What do they do for the community to protect child molestation? Now, let me tell you something that I would love for someone to address. I would love for this question to be asked. And we're going to do a video about this too. And that is, most people don't know that there is an official child molestation watch program. Most people are not aware of that. That the Watchtower organization has an official child molestation watch program.
I remember once a circuit overseer told me that he had brothers follow known pedophiles around assemblies. But, you know, I was a single parent with 2 small boys, so I had to wait outside toilets all the time. So then I learned that there was pedophiles at assemblies. I couldn't go into the male toilets.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
You know? So what are brothers watching these men for? And what if they lost sight of them?
Oh my goodness. I'm telling you, someone in a court setting like the Royal Commission needs to inquire about the Watchtower's official child molestation watch program. There are going to be people going to hear this video and they're going to say, I ain't never heard of that. But actually it is, because that's one of the things that the brothers will say. They'll say, as they often will make the point, that what we do is we watch this man. And so the question is very interesting. If you were to start asking some questions, well, could you tell me what are the qualifications for the men who are on this watch program where they're going to watch a pedophile? Is there a log that you keep of how many hours this person was watched? Where are you watching this person at? Well, of course, we watch it when he comes to the Kingdom Hall. So let me make sure I got this right. He comes into the Kingdom Hall. Are there any elders assigned that night to do watching, or is everybody watching? Well, we all watching. So what are you watching for? Well, we're watching to see if he is too close to kids. He go in the bathroom with a kid. Okay, so the man doesn't do any of that the 2 hours he's at the Kingdom Hall, right? Right. Now keep in mind the question that the court is asking. This is the question the court is asking, and this is what the Watchtower is not going to be able to address. This is going to be their Achilles heel. They can't address this. Now keep in mind, now we're talking about what do you do as a religious entity to protect the kids in the community. So now when this man leaves the Kingdom Hall, the question is, so who's watching him? You said that you have him on a watch program. Who's watching him? Or you say, well, he comes out in field service. We have an elder working with him, watching him. Now, what happens if you're at someone's home and they invite you into their house? They invite you into their house because they see 2 men outside with a Bible. People respect the Bible. They invite you into their house. You sit down with the man who's a pedophile, but the elder is watching him. Now, what would that householder say with kids standing there? Say hello to the 2 gentlemen. Hello, my name is Tommy, my name is Johnny. What would that householder say if that householder knew that that elder had brought in a man who's a known pedophile, but we got him on our watch list? We watching him for you. Don't worry about it. See, that's the kind of crazy reasoning that Jehovah's Witnesses do. And when you're talking to non-Jehovah's Witnesses, they realize immediately these guys are crazy. If they think that this is an effective program, you bring this man into our neighborhood to watch kids, and this is what you're doing? So, I mean, it is amazing how, as Jehovah's Witnesses, we never actually took the time to think about a lot of the things that we did and a lot of things that we said and just how foolish and ridiculous it actually sounds.
Well, also, you know, we talk about the elders as not being a clergy class, but the two elders that come to investigate my child's abuse both had daughters. One had very young daughters, and they moved out of the congregation, you know, within the next 2 years. So when my daughter remembered her abuse, of course it's 10 years later, and I mentioned it to an elder, and he knew. He'd moved into the congregation and somebody had passed that information on. So,
yeah.
So what sort of system is that? You know, you know, that's very shonky. I mean, well, their child protection policies and procedures are ridiculous.
Yeah, and you see, the difference is that many religions, they teach their, you know, when this issue comes up, they teach their people who are confronted with this, you take this issue to the proper authorities and let them handle it. Let me give you a perfect example of the problem with this policy. And just the overall problem that the way that Jehovah's Witnesses have decided that they're going to do this stuff themselves works. Let's say, for example, a sister is at the Kingdom Hall with her children. They're doing a cleaning. They clean the Kingdom Hall. And for whatever reason, however it happens, a little girl is molested at the Kingdom Hall. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
The child says nothing about it until they get home. Later that evening, the child complained about pain. Mom said, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? And the little girl tells her. It's 10, 11 o'clock at night. Now, what is every Jehovah's Witness trained to do when they have problems in the congregation?
Ring the elders. Ring the elders.
I like the way y'all guys said it down on the ring the elders, ring the branch. I like that. I like that. They would ring the elders. Now, keep in mind now, it's 10, 11 o'clock at night. This is a Saturday night, right? So this is a Saturday night, right? So now what are the elders going to tell the sister at this point that they can do? They say, we'll get together tomorrow and talk to you and Brother Jones about this thing. We'll get to the bottom of this tomorrow. So now the little girl has, she has DNA material on her clothing. Now, are the elders going to tell her, now, sister, don't wash the girl's clothes. Don't give the little girl a bath. In fact, go to the hospital and get a rape kit done. No. Why are they not going to tell her that? Because they know nothing about this. So now Sunday rolls around. Well, the brother they had planned on meeting with, he got to work that day. He's not at the Kingdom Hall. He working all day. So now the elders get to the hall with the little girl and the parents. The brother ain't there because he got to go to work that day. Now keep in mind what day it is. Now it's Sunday. So because it's Sunday, they will probably not be able to reach anybody at Bethel in the legal department. Because at Sunday, most of the Bethelites, they're out at their Kingdom Halls. So they probably won't be able to reach anyone. So we're looking going into Monday. Now remember, this happened on Saturday. We're now going into Monday before the elders can even call the society to get any information. Now what's happened to all this DNA matter? It's disappearing. It's going away. It's been washed down the drain. And now they finally get in touch with the branch. And they actually live in a state or a jurisdiction where there is no reporting. So the elders don't have to go and report nothing. Now keep in mind, they have not met with the brother yet. They haven't even caught this guy because he was working all day Sunday, so they couldn't get with him. And if they call him up and he said, well, I'm tired, I get with y'all all day long. So now they have to schedule time to meet with this child rapist. You see the problem you're having? Whereas a call at 10:30 at night to the police would have changed all of that. It would change all of that.
I've really tried to emphasize that I'm not on a vendetta against the alleged abuser of my child because I've reported it to the police once it goes to the Royal Commission, his name has become as part of their process and they involve the police. So I'm happy that it's been handed to the proper people. But what happened instead, you know, with me is that the society's faulty two-witness rule made me sit there for 12 years, you know, in this state of limbo. It should have been handled. It was an allegation. A man should be happy to walk into the police station and say, look, this child has made an allegation. Let's sort it out now. Instead, I sat in the Kingdom Hall for 12 years on increasingly big doses of industrial strength antidepressants. Because I found it really cruel sitting there waiting, always in anticipation. who's going to get hurt so that my child will be believed, and it won't be any of the elders' daughters, so it's going to be that single parent or that single parent. And after I left and faded, and before we moved away from the town, I actually went up and spoke to one of the single parents who spent a lot of time at barbecues and things with that family. And I said, look, I'm really sorry. I never attempted to protect you, and I'm breaking the rules now of the organisation. But I'm telling you that your children were in danger. And she was so angry with me. She was so upset. You know, and it's interesting too that I had the same doctor, the GP we call them here, for all those years, 30 years, and he kept trying to get me off these drugs. I'd just become like a weak witness sitting there just drugged up. You know, people just, and it was like I was encouraged just to wait for Armageddon, go under the doona, wait for Armageddon. The new system will fix everything. And also there's a culture in witnesses of horizontal bullying. So women bully other women, elders' wives and others and pioneers, so that you keep towing the line. And when I finally, in Australia, we have a system, people on a low income can get 6 free visits to a psychologist. So eventually I said to my GP, after my daughter had remembered and I'd been to the police, I said, I'm going to need some counselling. And he said, why? And I told him about the 2-witness rule, and he nearly died.
People fall. When people hear that, they fall out. They're like, man, you got to be kidding.
What amount of chemicals can cover up that pus? Yeah. I was in emotional pain and trying to dumb it down with chemicals. I'm not on any antidepressants now. I haven't been for many years.
That's good. That's excellent.
It makes you sick. That religion makes you emotionally, psychologically.
I used to see it a lot with a lot of circuit overseers here in the States. A lot of circuit overseers' wives used to suffer from chronic fatigue syndrome, and it's kind of amazing because it's like they don't even work a job. They don't have to work a job, but they're in an environment many times where it just drains them. I mean, it's really amazing. Circuit overseers, that is a big issue when I was growing up and seeing it, even when I was at Bethel, of the number of circuit overseers' wives who would often be. You would hear, with Sister Johnson, she's suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome, and it's amazing. But it's interesting how you have witnesses, and remember I mentioned to you how the court kept asking the representatives of the organization, do you guys understand our latest findings, our latest understanding? Witnesses often say, and I love this line, I just love this line. When asked about reporting to the police, the elders are told to say, like the representative, well, we leave it up to the individual to decide if they want to go to the police or not. We let them decide. We let them decide. Now, one of the things that people have learned about this whole issue of child molestation many times, especially if it's within the family. If it's within the family many times, psychologists and researchers, they'll often point out that if the child is being abused, there's a very good possibility that mama is also being abused by the dad as well. Yeah. And as a result, she is afraid. And so while, yes, she is free to go and tell the police, she's as scared as anybody else. She's as scared as anybody else. Because you have to think about this. Now think about this. Think about this. The wife who goes to the elders, turns in her husband, and then has to go home. And the elders said to her, ain't that we can do, Sister Joan? Ain't that we can do? Now, what do you think that conversation is like on the ride back home? You got the little child in the back, you got mama sitting in the passenger side, and you got daddy who been raping the little child. What do you think is the tone in that car? Do you really believe the tone is going to be one where now this woman who just went to the elders and got shot down is now got the fortitude to now go to the police? You must be out of your mind. And that's what the court has come to understand, and psychologists and behaviorists. They understand that if the mom is in an environment where she's been abused, she's probably living in much the same fear. She's not going to do anything. So what that means is that's where friends come in and say, look, you need to talk to someone. Because I found it very interesting that one of the elders on the stand, he made a very, very powerful statement, and you could look at the people's faces in the courtroom. They was like, I know he didn't just say that. one of the elders, he said there are times when they will hear cases like that and they believe, I believe that little girl was raped, but I ain't got but one witness. I believe he probably is raped. So the court is like, you as a grown man believe this little girl's telling the truth, but you ain't gonna do nothing? And so the question comes up for a religious institution. Here in the United States, I don't know if you may be familiar with it now. Here in the United States, we have this thing called the Playboy Club. It's run by a guy named Hugh Hefner. You know, they got the bunnies running around there with, you know, half naked and stuff, right? Now, if people in general were to hear that, man, I heard there was some child molestation going on up at the Playboy Mansion, you would probably not find a lot of people who would say, well, man, I can't believe that's impossible, because they don't do those kind of things up there, okay? So people, if they were to hear something like that, you would have a lot of people like, well, I ain't really surprised. But now think about religion, a minister, Word of God, Jesus Christ, all this kind of stuff. That is an environment where people, in a general sense, have historically not associated children being raped and molested. That's just the way it is. People have given the church the benefit of the doubt historically. Now, of course, once the cap got blown off with the Catholic Church, then of course now everybody's looking at religion out the corner of the eye now. But historically, people are like, no, not Pastor Johnson. No, he's a fine man. He's a fine man. And so historically, people have given the churches the benefit of the doubt. So all of a sudden, you now have churches where this issue is going on, and now people realize the difference with the church is the church has a reputation. And what is that? See, the Playboy Mansion has no reputation for righteousness and all this kind. They're not running around talking about we righteous. Okay, religions in general, their claim to fame is we are righteous and moral people. And so the question becomes, even if you have no legal responsibility, in other words, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society has no legal responsibility, even if you win that battle, you now are facing the moral side. How do you as a church, a religion, a denomination don't feel you have a moral obligation to let folks know that there's a man walking around in the community raping kids? And this is the problem that the society has that they cannot overcome. And this is the problem that they're running into with this issue of what does your religion do to protect little Johnny, who is not a Jehovah's Witness, down the street, when you come to know that within your ranks there's a man who has a propensity to want kids? And that cannot be answered with the society's current policy. And that's where that two-witness rule, because this is what it means. Child one is raped and molested. Before the elders will do anything to this man, they say what? We need another child to get raped and molested. Now, once we get that second one, we can then take action. Now, in the Kingdom Hall and at the Circuit Assembly, that sounds like a wonderful and bright idea. But when you're talking to people outside the organization who are in charge of your tax status, you sound absolutely like a fool. You got to wait till the second child is raped before your organization can do something? Is that what you're telling this court? That you have to have at least 2 kids raped before you do anything? Think about this. What happens if the person decides not to rape another Jehovah's Witness kid? Instead, he decides to rape kids in the neighborhood. So you could have 5, 6, 7, 8 more kids raped, and you guys already knew about the first one getting raped. These are the type of problems that the organization is running into, because the arguments that they use at the Kingdom Hall when they're standing on the platform and all the witnesses are nodding to, yeah, I agree, that makes sense. That stuff don't work outside the Kingdom Hall. That stuff don't work outside the Assembly Hall. And this is the problem you and I and everyone who watched that testimony that they gave. The society presented a case and a position that looked absolutely ridiculous. And it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. I mean, it's gonna really be interesting to see what happens.
It makes it a pedophile's paradise. My grandfather was a world champion axeman, and we lived in a small community where he owned a timber business and had a lot of regard from an area that really admired physical prowess. So him and my father and son-in-laws and the men in the family were very, very physically strong, capable men with their hands. And my grandfather chose, I had an aunt who married a very, very abusive witness, and his children were physically assaulted and belted by him all the time. So those children were very, very vulnerable. So he raped most of those children. He didn't rape my other cousin because he said she was too spiritual. And he didn't rape me, probably because I'm the only daughter of the only son. And also I grew up mostly with my disfellowshipped mother and come back to witnesses as an adult. And yet he was disfellowshipped twice for ones he got caught red-handed with. But after he died and after I faded away and worldly people would talk to me from the community, because he had such a level of trust as a religious man and a sportsman, people invited him into their houses everywhere, and I heard he raped a child of an employee, another child. It's just, and some of these people that he's hurt are now alcoholics. They have severe mental and emotional problems. And when I asked the brothers about it, they said these people were just weak in the truth. These women were weak in the truth, and they just needed to pray to Jehovah and get over it because he's dead and he's paid for his sins.
Yeah, that's a very common view. Very, very common view.
That's the way it works, isn't it? It gave him total freedom to act with impunity as a pedophile in a community that completely trusted him.
Yeah, and that's the whole reason why the court is concerned, because one of the things that childhood behavior experts and people who are experts in this field have come to understand for whatever reason, and they're still trying to figure it out, but one thing they have come to the conclusion that generally speaking, not I'm not going to say every single individual, but generally speaking, they recognize that if a person is a child molester, he will do it again. They're going to be repeat offenders. And see, that goes back to this whole issue of this hearing. See, the court kept asking, do you guys understand what we know about child molestation and pedophiles, the knowledge we have? And that is, these guys are going to strike again. And if you as an organization, as an entity, because see, when the society tried to shift it to the little sister with 3 kids and an abusive husband and why she hasn't gone down and told the police, that's not going to protect the society. We live in a world where organizations, they have what is known a certain responsibility to communities and society in general. And that's the question that the court is asking. The court is not asking, what does this little individual citizen, Miss Sally Johnson, do when her child is molested? The question the court is asking is, what does this large conglomerate, which has databases and names and records and files and dates and offenses, what do you guys do with this information? And this is the part that the society is going to have to address. And keep in mind, the organization is based in over 200 countries around the world. So we're talking about all kinds of laws and all kinds of different statutes of limitation and all of this stuff. And this stuff is coming at the society from all angles. See, the only ones we're seeing is what we might consider high profile. But this stuff is all over the world, little small countries and islands where this stuff is going to now come out. And the society got to put legal teams together, get folks down there, fly these guys in, hire local attorneys, bring them up to speed on how our policies and our procedures are. So this stuff is like a nightmare. I mean, it's literally like a nightmare, because the society we live in, their views are shifting. See, years ago, people would say, well, don't talk about this old stuff, leave it alone. Society we live in today is not taking that attitude. In various countries and states around the world, legislative bodies are enacting laws which allow there not to be statute of limitations, or either they move the statute of limitation back 20, 30 years. That's why you're seeing all these grown people out of the Catholic Church, 45, 50, 60 years old. They're able to go to court with their case. Because as a society in general, people like, that's terrible. We got to rectify this. We've got to rectify this wrong. Now the problem with this for Jehovah's Witnesses is, all of this stuff is being done by people who are considered worldly. These are people who are considered members of Christendom. They're Satan's first cousin. And yet they are taking steps to try and rectify this type of stuff while the society is digging their heels in. They're trying to cover it up. I mean, they're trying to delay cases going to court. They won't give up certain documents that they're being asked to give up. And so when people in the world sit back and see a religious institution that has been asked to provide documents A through C, and they provide nothing, that is a public relations nightmare. All my life as a Jehovah's Witness, and every Jehovah's Witness, their entire life has revolved around trying to make Jehovah's Witnesses look good. The image, it is. The image, Jehovah's Witnesses have historically been able to craft a wonderful public image.
Yeah.
What we're seeing is what people saw in The Wizard of Oz. The little dog has moved the curtain back, and the great wizard is not so great, and people are starting to see it.
You know what makes me really sad as a wife and a mother who was treated very badly with the shunning, and I still wasn't well, and it was a terrible process to go to, is, there's a French philosopher called Foucault, and he stated that when a society or an in-group like Jehovah's Witnesses label a person in a derogatory way, like crazy or junkie or mentally diseased, it allows the dominant group to treat the person as less than human. So then I get on these sites and see Let and Ash calling with this arrogance and this incompetence. And you know what? He's a parasite. He's wearing clothes and watches and eating food that my 4 generation of family donated with their hard work. And yet he's standing up there calling me mentally diseased. He's calling me a liar. They're attacking the victims. Yeah.
Well, you have to understand, they got to protect the business now. you got to be honest now. They got to protect the business. I mean, it is a business. So I mean,
he's a company man, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a company man. He got to protect the business. I mean, that's just the way it is. We got to protect the business. This is what I was told once by a very, very respected person. He was, look, there's always going to be collateral damage. This is the type of stuff that corporations state. This is the type of stuff that countries state about people being killed when we drop a bomb. That's just going to be some collateral damage. That's just the way it is. And so this is the way the organization approaches it. People need to understand the organization has no problem sacrificing anybody. And the reason they can do that, it's like when they change the thing on blood. You couldn't take this particular blood fraction, and then all of a sudden you could. And the response of the organization was like, don't worry about it, man. They're coming back in a new system. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And so this is how they play stuff off. They just brush it off. Well, the little girl was raped, man. When she get a new system after 1,000 years, she won't even remember anything that happened. Jehovah will take care of that. That's how they play stuff off. And because, generally speaking, as a witness, you're not really conditioned to be a critical thinker. You sit there and nod your head, yeah. When she get in the new system, she won't remember that. I know this brother who was persecuted in the concentration camp. He won't remember how he was persecuted in the concentration camp once we get in the new system. So if the little sister was abused, once she get in the new system playing with the donkeys and the turtles, and the flowers and everything, she'd be okay. She'd be okay. That's just how witnesses' mind think. And I'm gonna tell you that it's sad. When I look back now, and I talk to people who've left, sometimes we're like, man, I can't believe we fell for that. We fell for the okie doke. We were bamboozled and hoodwinked, and we didn't even realize it. I mean, like you said, you sat there for 12 years thinking, I'm going to wait on Jehovah. I'm going to wait till Jehovah do something. And it had nothing to do with Jehovah. It had the fact to do with, we were told and conditioned, don't you say that now. You just be quiet, leave it alone. Just leave it alone. I mean, when I got ready to leave the organization, I went to talk to people that I highly respected, mentors, men I highly respect, because I knew when I decided to leave the organization, I knew I was going to lose everybody I have known, all the elders I've worked with for 20, 25 years, all these guys I grew up with. I knew I was going to lose all of these guys. And so I wanted to talk to someone because I said, this is a serious thing I'm about to do. And when I was talking to these guys, their attitude wasn't like, well, JT, man, you're going to destroy your relationship with God. You want to, be patient with God. That was not their attitude. Do you know what their attitude was? JT, man, you and your wife, y'all doing good in the organization, man. Don't mess around and lose your positions and stuff like that, man. You doing real good. Don't you? I'm thinking about leaving God, man. You're talking about some position on some district assembly. And this is what they were saying. And so when I walked away, I was like, oh my goodness. They were more concerned about how I'm gonna give up some positions as opposed to these issues I raised and how this is supposed to affect my standing before God. And I'm telling you, that to me was the most shocking thing. I actually thought these guys were going to be concerned about JT, your salvation, your standing before God is on the line. That was not what they said to me. They were like, JT, you doing good, man? Don't bite. As one brother said, don't bite the hand that feeds you.
It's very enjoyable here too, and it's so interesting to see all the parallels. And we'll watch for what the Royal Commission does next. It should be very interesting.
When is the Royal Commission scheduled to have their hearing? I think in February sometime.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it is. Yeah.
Okay, we'll keep an eye open.
Yeah, and there's been quite a bit about it in the press here about how Jehovah's Witnesses have been characterised as worse than the Catholic Church. That's been quite prominent. But a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses, if you talk to them at the carts or at the doors, believe it's apostate lies.
Oh yeah, and that's pretty normal. I tell people you need to understand that the society has already conditioned its members as to how. This is one of the things I think is the most unique thing about the organization. And I tell people you need to understand and take advantage of the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses are like a person who's playing chess. As a former Jehovah's Witness, you know every single move that the Jehovah's Witness will make. You know every single response the Jehovah's Witness will give. Every Jehovah's Witness is taught, and I can't stress this enough to people, Jehovah's Witnesses have been training from day one. They have been in training from day one as to how to respond if anyone approaches them and actually questions what the Watchtower writers publish in their journals. See, most people don't realize that the Jehovah's Witness has been practicing and been trained. How do I respond the day someone steps up to me and raises and challenges what the Watchtower writers have written? And what have they been trained to do? They have been trained to divert away from the issue that you raise. Even if the issue is legitimate, they will direct it and say, this person is upset because somebody cut them short in the congregation. They've been offended by someone in the congregation, one. Or two, this person has a bad ego. He has a bad attitude. He's not humble. He's proud. He's arrogant. And so the Watchtower has been training us as Jehovah's Witnesses for as long as I've been a Jehovah's Witness. I was Jehovah's when I was a kid. So all my life going to meetings, I know if someone comes up to me and they're raising a question or an issue with what has been published by the Watchtower writers, I am to respond by saying, this person is not humble. This person has an ego. This person has an attitude. Or somebody cut him short in the kingdom hall. He's mad because he didn't get a position. That's what I've been trained to do. Never is a Jehovah's Witness allowed to say, well, maybe the society could have been wrong on that one. They're not allowed to do that. And so their response is just a natural reflex. It's just a natural reflex. They've been trained and they're good. The training has been thorough. And if you think I'm joking, go talk to any Jehovah's Witness and try and challenge anything that the Watchtower writers say. You will get those basic Watchtower talking points every single time.
Well, that's basically why they don't talk to us. That's why they shun. They will not listen. So that means, they shut you out. They treat you as you're dead.
They have to. They don't have any choice. And that's the thing, as former Jehovah's, we understand that. I tell people, you're not telling me, I tell people all the time, don't be bringing these little 50-cent Kingdom Hall and Watchtower talking points when we're having a discussion, because I used to use the same thing. So I already know it. I already know what you're going to say. You're going to have to move beyond that and look back at the issue that we were trying to discuss previously. Look at our YouTube channel, and you will see a certain pattern by current Jehovah's Witnesses who post. They will attack the messenger. They rarely address the issue that you raise. Even if it's a legitimate issue, even if it's a legitimate point, let's look at the Watchtower published material. No, we're not going to do that. JT, you just got a bad attitude. You just mad at the brothers and this kind of stuff. Well, they ain't got nothing to do with what they wrote. They wrote this stuff. I didn't write this stuff.
It was in a magazine. I'm just talking about it. Don't try to change the subject and put it on me. They're the ones who wrote this ridiculous stuff, and then they got to come back and try to clean it up.
Oh, yeah. Well, isn't that interesting that, I have less value than a pedophile to that organisation. And when I walked into a police station, and I'm 50 years old, I walk into a police station, well dressed, well presented, still married to the same husband, no sex, drugs and rock and roll. The shunning was dreadful. And even our 16-year-old son, who's working at Woolworths on the checkouts after school, was shunned, and he wasn't even baptised. Or I was nursing at the hospital, and an elder who I considered a very good family friend physically turned his back while I was nursing his mother. And also it was really interesting. When I started university, we had a very senior tutor, a doctor of social work, and I found university very interesting and stimulating. But one day she said, after a tutorial, "Can I speak to you privately?" And she inquired if I was a victim of domestic violence, because she said I was exhibiting some of the symptoms. And I stated I wasn't a victim of domestic violence, but recently exited a high control cult. And she's being an expert in domestic violence. She was very sadly familiar with Jehovah's Witnesses. And so this ostracism and shunning was for upholding Australian law and doing the morally correct thing to do.
Well, Leesa, it was absolutely great to have the opportunity to talk with you. And we are so thankful that you were able to share your personal experience. And once again, you have confirmed what I've always said, and that is every single Jehovah's Witness has a story to tell, and we're glad that you were able to tell yours.
Thank you very much, Lady C and JT, for treating me with such kindness and respect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on our program. We really appreciate your time and your willingness to tell your story.
This program was sponsored by Critical Thinkers.